Hello everybody, my name is Daulton Nelson, and today I'd like to give my thoughts on a game I just beat, that game being WALL-E for the PC. WALL-E is a 3D action platformer developed by Asobo Studio and published by THQ. Meanwhile, WALL-E was a 2008 animated film by Pixar Animation Studios. It starred the titular robot and its story of adventure, action, and environmentalism. It's a pretty good movie, and a favorite of mine from Pixar, and no doubt a favorite for many others. Of course, with WALL-E being a film kids could enjoy, it was only inevitable that there would be several ways the film would be translated to other mediums so that more profit can be made off of it. This includes toys, brand deals, and of course, video games. In my review of Disney Fairy's Tinker Bell, I spoke briefly of the polarization of licensed video game tie-ins, and how, while there are some revered titles, there are also a lot of poor quality, cheaply made cash grabs. In the same review, I labeled the THQ WWE games as an example of good, licensed games, and they still are. But make no mistake, THQ as a publisher back in the day was wildly inconsistent, releasing seemingly anything they could, and the quality was all over the place. Case in point, the same year today's game was released also saw the release of Daulton, a favorite of mine I did a revisiting on a while back. So, the main question I was asking going into WALL-E was, is this going to be one of the better games THQ released? And, well, it did take a bit, but WALL-E answered with a firm no. I do say take a bit, because this game starts off well enough. Before we continue, I should point out that there were a couple of versions of the WALL-E game that were released, some by different developers and are different games entirely, so keep in mind during this review that I'm talking directly about WALL-E on the PC by Asobo Studios. Anyway, the game starts out as an action platformer where you have to guide WALL-E through a post-apocalyptic Earth landscape using his skills. WALL-E can move around, with his movement speed being variable, and will change depending on whether or not you're going up or down a slope. With this speed, WALL-E can jump between slopes or jump over large pits. Speaking of jumping, WALL-E can jump on demand with the press of the space key, but only horizontally? He's like that guy from the Holy Mountain. When WALL-E jumps, he doesn't move vertically, so you can't jump up small ledges or anything like that. You can only jump between spaces that are on the same plane, or you have to use ramps to jump up to higher places. Meanwhile, if you've seen the movie, you know that WALL-E can collect trash and compress it into a nice box. These boxes in-game translate to throwable objects WALL-E can use to flip switches or destroy faraway destructibles. WALL-E also has a laser he can use, but it has limited energy. WALL-E can also pop in and out of first-person view to help you aim and survey the level ahead. Although, frustratingly, you can't control the first-person view with the mouse, despite being able to control the third-person perspective in that way. The main gameplay loop of these action platforming sections has to do with WALL-E collecting enough blue energy to open a gate so that he can get to the next section. How you get these is by destroying boxes strewn throughout the level, but there are different types of boxes. Blue boxes give you the blue energy. Meanwhile, gray boxes have to be destroyed either by throwing blocks at them or rolling into them with your box form, and red boxes can only be destroyed with your laser. The gray and red boxes will give health and laser energy when destroyed, so you really don't need to worry about that whole limited laser thing. Each level of WALL-E ends by getting to a certain point at the end of a level. These are completely arbitrary and aren't communicated to the player, so you just run into an invisible trigger and the level just ends. These levels do have some nice side goals that could persuade you to come back to them, in where you have to break all the boxes a la Crash Bandicoot, or find hidden objects. These hidden objects I really like specifically. The way you find them is a little odd, as these hidden objects are sparks on the ground that you can clearly see, but you can only pick up the object if you've identified it in the first-person view. Once you do pick up the object, you are treated to a nice cutscene of WALL-E playing with the object. You even get some cool references to the movie. At level's end, you're given points based on your level completion and crate destruction. You can use these points to buy bonuses like cheats and concept art. Again, this is something I really like within WALL-E. Alas, suffice it to say that this game is already too complicated for its younger target demographic, And it's sad because the action platforming is the best part of the game. Everything else is just downhill from here. Because aside from just the platforming in WALL-E, it's also a racer, a shooter, a flying game, and at times a Frogger clone. And while I appreciate the variety, WALL-E never does any one thing particularly well, nor is all of this variety focused on one thing like Pool Panic is. WALL-E just doesn't seem to know what it wants to be. It's like it doesn't trust its player to stay interested in what it has to offer, so it does all of this other things in order to distract them, but obviously it doesn't work. Plus, WALL-E becomes more boring the longer it goes on. It's a 4-hour game that feels twice its length. And this isn't helped by the lack of any tension within the gameplay. There's almost no threat to the player save for the janky jumping mentioned earlier, and Mo, who will run into you constantly the moment you're in his line of sight. WALL-E also isn't the most stable game out there either. There were several times in the game where certain key objects wouldn't spawn in, causing me to restart the level, or enemies going invisible all of a sudden, making the audio of the game more important so as to use it to locate your now transparent foes. Speaking of the audio, it sucks. There's plenty of bad sound effects and voice lines they clearly ripped straight out of the movie, Lego Traveler's Tales style. Although one thing I wish they did rip from the movie was the score, cause god does this original score for the game blow. When it isn't boring electronic bleeps and bloops, it's this weird Latin marimba that just does not fit. The only part of the score I like is when they use the hook from Put On Your Sunday Clothes from Hello Dolly, and even then it gets old after a while. WALL-E's look is very poor. A lot of the game has this bloom effect that makes the game look very washed out and hazy, plus the low texture fidelity isn't helping. And it's a shame because WALL-E does have a few good set pieces like scaling a giant fallen crane, or the garbage depths of the Axiom. WALL-E doesn't even do its movie tie-in sections well, as a lot of the cutscenes are poorly edited and missing essential story beats needed to understand what is going on. All in all, WALL-E is a mess, and a boring one at that. While it has a few fun and interesting tidbits here and there, the lack of any clear direction, coupled with the poor quality of the overall product, leaves a sour taste in my mouth. So, I'm going to give it a final score of a low 3 out of 10. Most of you likely weren't going to get this anyway, so me saying this is bad isn't going to affect you as much, but for me, it sucks to see WALL-E treated this way, cause WALL-E has a neat world and a great story, and there's definitely a good adventure game in the movie somewhere, but as the years pass by, WALL-E's footprint in video games is only going to amount to this. Thanks, THQ. That concludes my review of WALL-E for the PC. If you like my reviews, you can like, comment, or subscribe. I also have social media links down in the description below, as well as a link to my online portfolio where you can see video game design works that I have done, as well as a link to my Backloggd profile where you can see my ratings. And with that out of the way, please make sure to have a nice day.